So, continuing, I think there was one more example that we had planned for you to discuss.
Well, there's a couple more things I'd like to say. One is, I think, getting in touch, again, it's so important to get in touch with your anger. And in future podcasts, I'm going to talk about how to do that, like where instead of feeling guilty, we can actually identify who caused, committed the crime, right? And be able to be angry at that person. So getting the rage that we tend to be directing towards ourselves directed at the right person, I think is a really important part of the work. And actually, it's just societally so important. I always am saying, people don't know who they're angry about. They don't know what they're angry at. It's coming out everywhere in our society, and they don't actually realize who and what they're angry at. But that will be another podcast, because it's a super important topic.
Okay.
But what I was going to say about the healing that guilt, I took a class from a woman named Chloe Madonis. It was a 2-day class. It was one of the better classes I've taken, and I've taken a ton. And this class was about healing sexual trauma within families. And so it worked with, siblings that had sexual contact that were not okay, or a parent or an uncle, or, all different versions of sexual assault and molestation that happens within families all too commonly. And her goal actually was to heal the family and not just like take the abuser out necessarily and like send them off to jail. She wanted to make it so it never ever happened again, and that it wasn't a legacy that ended up getting passed down the generations. And so what was so fascinating to me was she held the whole family accountable. So if say a 7-year-old girl was sexually abused by her 15-year-old brother, they didn't just blame the brother. They blamed the whole family for not knowing what was going on in the family, and everyone was considered culpable to that, especially the parents. So they could say, the 15-year-old did this and we had no idea, blah, blah, blah. But her point was, it is your responsibility to know what is happening to your young children. And are you not connected with them enough that they would come to you and tell you that something was upsetting, or they knew that that was going to upset you, so they didn't tell you? Or, you made it clear that you didn't want that information, or you're just oblivious and you're spending all your time at work, or you're drunk, or you're, doing things that keep you from actually having the knowledge of what is happening. So what she did is she would work with families. She had her own little 12-step program, but the step that stayed with me the most was the reparations. Like, what she did is, say the 15-year-old boy sexually abused the 7-year-old. He would have to literally, if you like doing it, like kneel down in front of his little sister, right? And beg her forgiveness. I am so sorry I touched you when you did not want to be touched, and I made you touch my penis, and I beg your forgiveness, right? And the person had to do this in front of the family, but that wasn't the thing that really struck me. What really struck me is then everyone in the family, including dad, mom, siblings, grandma, whoever, had to kneel down in front of this. I remember watching these it was like a little boy and a little girl that had been sexually abused, sitting there while their whole family stood there and put their hands together and begged their forgiveness for not paying attention and knowing what was going on in that family. I remember just tears streaming down my face, because I was like, wow. I mean, the level of her insistence that it was a family issue that was happening within the family, probably multi-generations of that family, and that everyone had to take responsibility for changing it. I was just blown away. And those kids, the opposite of what almost any kid gets, which is keep it secret, don't tell anyone, you should be ashamed, and a lot of times the perpetrator is saying horrible things like that too. So the kids walk away with all that shame. Instead, they do everything in their power to take any shame and guilt away from the kids. It was just so powerful to watch. And the kids were crying, and the family just, it was just incredible. And she had done this work with many, many families. And the decision was, like, if anything like that ever happened again, the person that caused the abuse, the predator, had to leave the family forever. Like, you had a one-shot deal. Like, they were going to repair this, and or if it ever happened again, you had to leave the family. You could not be, live in the home anymore. You could not have contact with the people that you had been harming, or you had to go to jail or whatever, but you were done. You were out. There was no more chances. And I remember her saying in all the years she had worked with this method, she had never had a relapse, as far as they knew, which kind of like blew my mind, right? Like, you're doing the opposite of what usually sexual abuse in families is, which is it's kept a secret. No, everybody is told, everybody apologizes, down to the grandma is down on her knees saying, I'm sorry, I should have known. This is my job to know this. It's not your job. It's not your fault. And then the person that was the perpetrator is supposed to get a job, if he's old enough, if she's old enough, and take that whole summer and take all the money and put it into an account for the kid's education or something positive in that child's life. So there's reparations made to that child instantly, right? Like, we talk about reparations all the time. Like, what do we owe our Native American people? What do we owe our Black people? But in these this family experience, they make that reparation right away, as soon as possible. And
even when we just discussed about the ownership of guilt, I think before some people change their ways or take ownership, there's got to be consequences. And the consequence here is steep. That's heavy. I mean, you're going to be ejected from the family unit forever.
Ever. That is it's been a long time since I've taken the class, but I know it was, if it was not forever, it was as long as there's kids in the house, or,
Minors.
Anyone that could be affected by it. But you were not allowed in that home again. So
management is a pretty
it's a severe consequence. But there was a whole process that led up to that, like the taking the guilt, the ownership of that guilt, doing something to heal that guilt, doing the whole amends process, looking at the whole family system and how does our family allow this thing to happen. I can't tell you how many times this just story, I've heard it so many times. Grandpa abuses mom. Mm-hmm. Mom doesn't, no one deals with it, right? Grandpa's what is it? We have the matriarch and the patriarch, right? He's the patriarch of the family. Mm-hmm. Mom has a new family. She allows her children to go and stay with grandma and grandpa. Mm-hmm. And grandpa sexually abuses her children. How does that happen? But it happens over and fucking over, because nobody is doing the work that I was just talking about, where the guilt is made clear where it belongs. That person has to own the guilt, and they're out of the family if they ever do it again. But no, we push it under the rug, we hide it, we pretend it didn't happen, or he's changed, or she's better, or, they would never do that again.
And
Why?
I think some of that is shame. You're ashamed that you lived through it. You had to keep it down. You had to deal with it and walk around with it. And rather than address our guilt, we somehow manage to put our children in front of that same train to get mowed down over that situation, just like we were.
It happens over and over and over. Trauma repeats itself until someone stops and does the work to heal. It just does. We just pass it down.
I have to wonder.
And by the way, I always, when I say something like that, there are always exceptions to every rule.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that come out of horrific families and do not abuse their kids. I do not want to make that implication. But they are probably struggling with inner pain
Mm-hmm.
that is not, that they do not know what to do with.
Yeah, well,
Even as they make a decision, no, I'm not going to hurt my own kids.
but yet that was the most prominent example of rearing children. And so that's going to be their default in a really tough situation. They've run out of choices to do it based on their own nature. Now they're referring back to their past. What their mom had done, what dad had done. So now we're asking advice of our inner child, who is definitely not equipped to give you an adulting answer.
Right.
And so I can see how those things just continuously regain momentum with each new generation that follows. So breaking that chain is so crucial. I think for a lot of us, we recognize that what mom and dad were doing were wrong. And it's like, if I'm a grown up, I'm never going to do that to someone. And sometimes, we're successfully managing without being our parents. I hate to say this out loud, but it kind of helps when you don't like your parents not to want to mimic them or go out of your way not to. But again, excuse me, as you talked about that generational guilt, somebody has to stop the pattern.
Mm-hmm. I think what is one of the hardest things that keeps people from being able to clarify what actually goes on in their family is in some families there's this kind of, how do I put this, family loyalty. Family loyalty trumps everything. You keep your dirty laundry in the family. You do not share it with anyone else. And no matter what, it's sort of the old biblical respect your mother and father. Doesn't matter what they do, you better damn well respect them. That is part of our culture. That is part of our heritage. That's how we operate. Respect your mother and father, even if he's fracturing your mother's skull or she is, whipping you with a belt. Your job is to respect that and be loyal to the roots of your family. And that particular version of things is very destructive because you're not actually given any permission to be angry when someone hurts you. This is part of our family. This is how we do things. This is, loyalty. We believe that, if someone harms someone, they should be hit. This is the way it operates, right? And so you're not ever allowed to make that connection between your legitimate anger and the person that you are actually angry at. And it is, I think, the source of so much violence in our culture. Right now is you don't know who you're angry at. Really, you're angry at dad, but you're not supposed to be angry at dad. So what do? You're, angry at this whole political system, or you're, angry at your children when it's not their fault. Like that anger shows up. I guess that's not a good example of the children, but you're angry at things, the guy in the car in front of you, when really that unexplored rage that you might have towards people that did the most malicious, violent things to you, that other people would go to jail for. You're not supposed to know about that, much less mention it, because that's being disloyal.
Yeah, and then I think those issues are compounded in homes that are a part of those heavy fundamentalist churches. Because then they're going to throw scripture at you to support their bad behavior. Obey, honor, all these things, So now you've got this additional layer of resistance keeping this bad series on the air.
Yep.
Because I know for me, scripture is frightening. You know, I mean, even the most innocent things can land you in the lake of fire, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera. And to a child to be on fire forever is just overwhelmingly horrifying.
Or you just happen to be the firstborn of the Israelites. Boom, you're
There.
dead, you know, just because
Yeah.
God decided, he decided we're getting rid of all these people, you know, necessary
context
sacrifice.
is such a hard thing for a child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because all we hear is the here and now. We don't get a context. You know, and it's scary. I think a lot of us still have some of our navigation controlled by our inner child, so that child still feels fear and confusion, but they're behind the wheel of a car now.
Right.
You know, and that car is our modern day adult life, and they're helping to steer it without the skill set. So it would be really cool if we can go back and tell our younger selves, hey, this is not your fault, you had nothing to do with this, you have a choice, but unfortunately we don't have that ability.
I remember I was in a store one time with my friend Jenny, who's a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
that we kind of share clients and you know, support each other a lot. And we were listening to this woman talk. She was going on and on and on about how, you know, in order to raise kids, you really had to have corporal punishment. You needed to be able to hit them and spank them and, you know, physically correct them. And that she was so pissed at the liberal media for trying to cast aspersion on that way of disciplining your kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how dare you? This is what was handed down to us by multi-generations. This is what the Bible says. You know, the cost of sin,
Mm-hmm.
of being a child, is that you need to be physically punished. And just the rage in her voice, and my friend and I just looked at each other and we're like, let's get out of here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it made me sick, because I knew, like, of course, this woman had been beaten, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably her parents had been beaten. She's beating her children. And who is she pissed at? She's pissed at the fucking liberal media, who's saying, yeah, this isn't actually shown to be a good way to discipline your kid. It's actually counter to what we, you know, statistically, the research shows hitting your children teaches your children to hide their behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and it also teaches them that violence is okay, right? That's what it teaches them. It does not teach them how to live a healthy, productive, happy life. Just doesn't work. So anyway, I'm just sitting there listening to that going, perfect example right there. How many generations of this has been going on, and where's the rage directed at? Not at her mom that beat her, but at the liberal media.
Mm-hmm. You know, the whole thing, you know, about children learning what they live is very, you know, something we forget. Just because we've told the child not to do something, they're going to witness something, and what they witness with their eyes is more powerful than what they witness with their ears. And we have to be conscious. Everything children, you know, view or see, you know, does come out. And, you know, there was a poem, you know, Children Learn What They Live by Dorothy Lal Nolte. I don't know if you've heard it, but I know we recited it when I graduated from Head Start. And if you don't mind, I'll share it with you.
Sure, I'd love it.
So it's children learn what they live, and if a child lives with criticism, he learns to condemn. If a child lives with hostility, he learns to fight. If a child lives with ridicule, he learns to be shy. If a child lives with shame, he learns to feel guilty. If a child lives with tolerance, he learns to be patient. If a child lives with encouragement, he learns confidence. If a child lives with praise, he learns to appreciate. If a child lives with fairness, he learns justice. If a child lives with security, he learns to have faith. If a child lives with approval, he learns to like himself. If a child lives with acceptance and friendship, he learns to find love in the world. And You know, if there was a parenting handbook, that would make a great opener.
Yep. Nowhere in there does it say if you hit your child, they learn to be better people.
No.
It's not in there.
And, you know, I'm going to spare our audience, you know, my singing, but the song, I Believe That Children Are the Future, you know, give them faith and let them lead the way, you know, show them all the beauty they possess inside. Mm-hmm. Give them a sense of pride. Mm-hmm. So we forget just how impressionable these little humans are. Mm-hmm. And we need to do a better job at preparing them for the road ahead and stop punishing them for the road behind them.
I agree. Thank you for sharing that poem. It's beautiful.
Well, I remember it so clearly. Maybe not verbatim, but like I said, I went to Charles Drew Head Start. And it was a big deal when we graduated from Head Start and made our way to kindergarten. And we had to do this little stage production for the parents and grandparents. And they had us recite that poem and sing that song, I Believe That Children Are the Future. Mm. We sung it horribly, but we were so proud of ourselves.
I bet. Well, that's about all I have to say on this topic. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
You know, I think I'm going to spend some time processing now. Mm-hmm. I mean, we always cover so much. I used to fancy myself one of the smarter guys in the room, but every time we have a conversation, I learn that I've got so much more to learn. And so that's humbling, and I like it. I like the ability to feel small. Mm-hmm. You know, because I'm a large physical presence. Yeah. And, you know, it's nice to be humbled by someone that you can learn from. Yeah. And not beaten down by knowledge, but lifted up by it. So, again, thank you so much, Victoria, for sharing and for giving us this forum, this venue, you know, to pick up more tools on our road to recovery, our personal recoveries. So, thank you very much. And I really look forward, as I keep saying, to our next podcast. So thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you, Michael, for sitting and having these conversations with me. It's wonderful. I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you.